The lady is on income support and therefore was getting a housing benefit to pay the rent. Heating bills were just horrendous, and so she was desperate. And the bank wouldn't entertain a loan because she wanted to borrow £300 and their minimum loan would be £500. So really she felt really up against it. Within 7 days from visiting her, we were able to secure a loan for her. And she said that if we hadn't been able to help her, she just doesn't know what she would have been able to do.
There's a sense in which financial inclusion is around poverty, disadvantagedness and debt, and those are the words that people automatically, in my understanding, actually recognise what we're about.
Money matters in rural areas because people need access to basic financial services and products. We're not talking complicated things here. We're talking things like affordable credit, access to savings, access to a bank account. Now, most of us take these things for granted. We use them every day. But there's a lot of people which live in rural areas which just don't have the ability to use them. Through the Financial Inclusion Fund, the government set up 16 financial inclusion champion teams. These teams are working across the country in partnership with local authorities and other stakeholders to promote financial inclusion within local communities. A key part of this role is to spread best practice from one part of the country to another, but also to support local authorities manage the policy process of including financial inclusion within their community plans and their local area agreements.
Well, we're quite fortunate in some of the areas that we're working with in West Yorkshire. We already have some very good members participating within financial inclusion. There are some good steering groups that are looking not just at specific issues around financial inclusion, but looking at financial inclusion holistically, to look at home contents insurance, to look at affordable credit, to look at access to banking. So rather than just concentrating on one issue, they're looking at all these issues and how they're interlinked and interrelated as well. In West Yorkshire, we have a good range of inner city populations and the countryside as well. And we're quite fortunate to have the expertise of a rural champion coming, working alongside us and the local authorities that we're working with.
People living in rural communities face many of the same problems and challenges as people in urban areas, but with financial inclusion, there are a few distinct challenges they do face. First of all, in rural areas, financial inclusion tends to be hidden. For policymakers and programmes, this means it's much harder to identify them and support these small groups. Another issue is around access, actually getting to the services like citizens' advice bureaus, like credit unions. Thirdly, there's the issue of cost. It often costs more to provide the same services in rural areas as it does in urban. What I'm pleased to see is the creation of more and more local financial inclusion partnerships, often led by the local authority. Now, partnerships are really important because it's only by providing a holistic package of services, such as debt advice, affordable credit, savings and bank accounts, and financial education, that you're really going to make financial inclusion embedded and sustainable over the long term.
In rural areas there has been a lot of post offices and banking facilities, which has caused a problem because people don't necessarily have access to get into larger towns that are further away. One of the options that can be used to overcome this is credit unions, which are a not-for-profit organisation, and they give people the opportunity to save, and after they've saved for a certain period of time they can then apply for small loans which are charged at a very, very low interest rate.
We had to look at how we can make the service a little bit more efficient and see more people. So we started asking questions of the clients, actually, you know, where do you do your normal shopping, where, you know, and all that sort of thing. And we found that most of them tend to go to the same sort of areas. So what we then decided was it's going to be better if they're going to do that and go shopping anyway. Wouldn't it be better if we had sort of like outreach branches, you know, which is these kind of appointment centres.
People's lifestyle, health and well-being go hand in hand with their finances. Yeah. I've seen so many people now where I've gone to their house because they couldn't face coming out to see me, to piles of unopened posts where they can't bear to open the curtains, they won't answer the door, they won't answer the phone. The fear of the debt has got to the extreme where they've actually isolated themselves.
I was talking to a 16-year-old recently, and I said to him, you know, when you get to the age where you want to buy a car, etc., what are you going to do? This was actually a client's son. well, I'll take a bank loan.
Yeah.
And that instantly is what comes to mind.
If I had, sort of, when I left school, sort of college age, somebody that actually come to us and say, okay, this is a credit card, this is the fun you can have with a credit card, but this is the reality of a credit card, it would have been useful. It's education. It can make such a difference to people. Simple hints and tips people don't think of, like making a meal planner and a shopping list and looking past product placement and things like that in supermarkets. Where do they shop? How do they shop? Just getting people to have a think about where their money goes.
In rural areas, there very often isn't Citizens Advice Bureau or money advice or credit unions or any of the other organisations within the rural location. So it's through contacting the rural social landlord and that landlord having good systems in place to signpost and guide people and work with other organisations who do deliver those services in a rural location.
I'm encouraging local authorities and housing providers to take a strategic approach to developing financial inclusion within their own sort of day-to-day housing management, but also looking at sort of wider initiatives that they can develop, how they can look at what they're currently doing, look at the impact that has on residents, and then look at the opportunities for developing their work. It's also about developing partnerships with other agencies in the area, developing partnerships with banks, with credit unions, with Citizens Advice Bureaus to make sure that residents get the services that they need. It's all about making sure that whatever happens is something that's sustainable and something that gets embedded in housing providers' procedures and practices.
These partnerships are having a real positive impact in rural areas. By working together, a host of organisations are providing a holistic package of financial inclusion services to rural communities. In this way, financial inclusion is being promoted and people are being helped to deal with their day-to-day money matters.